Hello everyone, my name is Chef Heidi Perrin. I am the culinary arts instructor here at Capital Area Tech, and this is...
I am Chef Matthew Crate. I am the chef instructor here at Somerset Career and Tech Center, where we are doing this video.
Today we're going to show you a couple of lobster dishes. We're going to do steamed lobster and baked lobster. We feel like it's really important for you guys to understand how lobster works because it is a $500 million industry here in Maine. So it's important to know at least these two dishes. So let's first talk about live lobsters. So how do we store live lobsters?
So lobsters oftentimes will come packed in newspaper like this. It's been soaked in salt water. You do want to keep live lobster away from fresh water. It does kill it, as it does with any kind of live shellfish, mussels, crab, anything that you get in live. The fresh water will definitely hurt it.
So definitely no ice?
No ice.
Okay.
Unless it's pre-picked, packaged in a plastic container or something like that, then ice, but not live.
Okay, so we have our two live lobsters here. One's a male and one's a female. It's kind of easy to tell actually even from the top between the two when they're side by side. A male's tail will be a little bit more narrow and a female's tail will be a little bit more wider. And that's where the customer thinks that they're getting more meat, more tail meat with the female, but that's actually incorrect. That extra room there is for the roe, which is actually the lobster eggs. So that's where she stores the lobster eggs, will be kind of underneath here. And we'll see if she's got any lobster eggs later on. But if we flip them over here and get them on their back, this is where we see the little swimmers. This is how they swim these here. You got to look at the left. Oh, she don't like that. So that's how she swims, is by flicking her tail like that. But if we open up her tail, she's not going to like me doing this. The last swimmers here are the ones you want to look at right before the body, okay? These ones look nice and feathery. That's because this is a female, okay? Now when we look at the male, let's see how he likes this. He's a little bit more calmer. Right here, the last ones here you can see are a little bit more bony. They're a little bit stiffer. They're not feather-like. So that is the male there too, okay? So you want to make sure you have these correct, especially when you're giving them a whole steamed lobster and the customers are going to be looking for that. You want to make sure that you know your stuff. Okay, next we want to talk about the two different types of Maine lobsters you can get. You can get a hard shell and a soft shell lobster. Lobsters molt, so that means that the shell kind of goes through different stages. So what are the two different stages that we kind of...
Right, so lobsters, like a lot of animals, their insides grow, but their outer shell doesn't, so they have to molt it. So soft shells are kind of prized for their sweetness. It's 90% of the catch. You're going to find soft shells, they're more common. Typically they have a sweeter meat, as opposed to the hard shell that is really much harder to crack open, but there's more meat. They filled into the shell at that point.
So like the soft shell is basically like a brand new shell for the lobster.
Correct, yeah. They've just molted.
Yeah.
If you guys have ever had soft shell crab, it's kind of the same thing. Right, in the hard shell, they've grown in and they're getting ready to molt again.
Okay. So why would you want to have a hard shell compared to like a soft shell lobster?
More
Like,
meat. There's more meat.
Yeah, yeah. And then the life also, because these are so new in their shell, the soft shells, they don't last as long out of the water, while the hard shells have a little bit more to them, so that they last a little bit longer. So if you have a lobster that you're going to be traveling with, or maybe it'll be like a week or so before you actually cook it, you might want to go with more of a hard shell lobster. And there are actually times in the year where you can get like an in-between type of lobster. So
that's correct, and for shipping
right.
as well, soft shells don't ship well.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy. You can take a soft shell and pretty much put your finger through it.
Yeah. Which today we have nothing but soft shells.
They're all soft shells today.
Yeah. So we're gonna break those down too. So okay, great. So why don't we go ahead and prepare these two lobsters for steaming lobsters. Do you want to do... Okay, so now we're preparing to steam the lobsters. what you want to do first is
remove the bands.
Yeah.
I remove them before I cook them for one major reason. When they're hot, taking these bands off can be a real pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't like rubber in my cooking liquid.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And I've heard that sometimes the lobster, while it's like steaming, it doesn't have the freedom to move its claws, so it sometimes makes it a little bit tough of the meat. But I'm to be honest, I haven't really noticed that difference. So what do you have? What kind of pot is going on here?
So this is kind of like a double boiler you guys would use. So this is an insert here. The difference being the insert is, can I pick it up without roasting my fingers? It's perforated, has holes in it. So that allows the lobsters to not be in the water, because we're not boiling the lobsters, right? We're steaming them. So
Yeah.
they're not actually in the water here. So there's a water level, a gap between the perforated pan and the stock pot. And so they're being cooked fully with steam.
Okay. Okay. So why would we want to steam instead of boil?
You don't want the water in that shell. Really all we're looking for is the steam heat. We're not looking for the actual boiling of the water. The movement from the water is going to make your lobster meat tough.
Yep.
And so a lot of seafood places you'll have, and I've talked to some of my students about getting a steamer at some point. They slide in fact there's one sitting right here. They'll slide into a steamer in a perforated pan. My students know this is my smoker, that's why it's colored the way it is. So they're never actually in the water. So you don't boil your lobsters, you steam.
Great. And so how long are we going to steam these lobsters for?
About 10 minutes.
Okay.
I think if you ask most chefs, they'd say somewhere between 9 and 11 is what you would hear. You don't want to overcook them. The more you cook them, they shrivel, they get tough. Seafood is one thing you definitely do not want to overcook. Shellfish in particular.
Yeah, yeah. And these are 1 pound to 1 1/4 pound lobsters, so that's why we're doing about a 9 to 10 minute steam. Okay. Our steamed lobsters are cooked. I just threw it into this hotel pan here. Some ice and now some cold water, just to kind of cool them down and stop them from cooking. If you wanted to serve this hot, if it was one of those dishes where the customer was going to be breaking it down themselves, you obviously just serve it hot to them. But we were going to break these down and make like a lobster salad out of this or something. Video. Okay, recording both.
But I'm not ready.
You're ready.
I'm not ready. Oh, pressure. Some people are used to being on TV. Some people aren't. All right. So now I'm going to show you guys how to break down a cooked lobster. Really, there are a couple ways to do it. They're all the right way. Most of you have probably seen the good old cracker, and if you were sitting at a dinner table with someone, you would probably use a cracker and not a wooden skewer perhaps, but they do make the little metal picks.
Yeah.
So these would be the two tools you would use. Being soft shell, you don't even really need a tool, and I'm going to show you that now. With a hard shell, yeah, you probably need something to get through the shell. These little spines can be quite hard, especially on a hard shell lobster. So you just kind of want to be careful you're not cutting your hands. See that happen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove everything from the body. There's really nothing to speak of that's usable in the body as far as meat goes. What we are going to do is save all the shells, as you can see here. Save the first one because it makes a great lobster stock. You can turn it into a bisque. You can make like a bechamel, or like a velouté, a lobster velouté out of it. So we're not done at this point. These are very useful. You can roast them off, and then I know my students at least have done many stocks, so you would do the same kind of procedure you would with a fish stock. So that goes in here. I'll show you a little trick with the legs here. There's not a whole lot of meat to speak of in these guys. but depending on where you're working and who your chef is, you may be required to remove this. So you can usually just push it out with your fingers sometimes not. So a little trick we have in the business is a rolling pin. You can see that meat.
Yeah, squeeze right out.
Squirts right out. So definitely, depending on who you're working for, you may be required to remove that.
Tedious work, but it got to be done, right?
Hey, you know, a lot of chefs look at everything as money, and that's really kind of the mindset you need to have if this is going to be your career choice. I am not going to pick them up.
And if you're at a barbecue and you're eating lobster yourself, I just simply
It's put it in my mouth like a straw.
Right, yeah, exactly.
You can pull it right out with your teeth.
Yep.
So we'll do the two claws first. You can see one's big, one's small. One's a pincher, one's a crusher. Every lobster will have two different shaped claws, just like this. Obviously, the bigger one has more meat. This is my favorite part of the lobster. I would take claws and knuckles, these are what we call the knuckles, over the tail all day long. I think it's sweeter. It's more tender than the tail, but historically the tail has been what people like because it is such a big piece of meat. So remove the knuckle meat. So what I'm going to do is take this part of the claw, just kind of pull it off, and there's this big piece of cartilage on both these claws. It's much bigger in this one, that if you're careful, and hopefully I can do it, if you pull kind of slowly. Oh, didn't happen. We'll show you on the other one. So again, the soft shell. Do you need a tool? Probably not. So that piece of cartilage I mentioned is actually still in here, and you do want to pull that out.
And you can kind of feel it when you kind of squish the claw just a little bit. You can feel that there's something.
Sometimes it will come out with that lower piece of the claw. Sometimes it just won't. And this is going to be one of those ones where it won't.
I think from experience, at least, the hard shells are a little bit easier to get that cartilage out.
Then you can see why you wouldn't want to eat that.
Right? But the soft shells, like what we have today, it's easier to kind of like lose that cartilage when you're pulling it out. Oh, that might be happening.
So this one came out.
Yep, beautiful.
So in a perfect world, it would do that every time. And then again, so in a hard shell, if you're working in a restaurant, I think you'll see a lot of cooks and chefs use just the back of a chef's knife to kind of crack into it if they don't want to use their hands. But again, with soft shell, it doesn't take much to get through.
It's a beautiful claw.
So there's your claw. So knuckle meat is awesome. Probably my favorite part of the lobster. And I just use my pinky. So I'll break this into 3 parts.
And they're kind of like, the parts are kind of already segmented.
Yep.
Can I see that whole one, Chef?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're kind of already segmented.
So, yep, there's a piece here, there's a piece here, and then there's a little piece right there.
Yep.
So that first piece popped right out. This piece, I like to just take my pinky and pops right out. So again, there's this little guy.
Now, if you're using this in like a lobster salad, it probably wouldn't matter so much if the pieces were kind of chopped up a little bit. But if you're making something like a lobster risotto, you kind of want those big chunks of lobster. It kind of showcases your skill to be delicate with the product, and also show that there's lobster in the product too.
So this knuckle came out in one piece, but you can see what Chef Parent was talking about, how it's kind of segmented right here, and oftentimes those will be, I'll break it for instructional purposes, but it would come out in 2 pieces like that. And this is just such good meat. And now the tail. So I've seen many people do tails many different ways. Some people will just break it right down the middle. I've seen people pop open one side. What I like to do is I'll start at the back and take these fins off. If you just kind of pull backwards, they crack right off. There is meat in there. I don't know if you can see this or not, Chef, but it looks like the meat has stayed attached to the tail in here. Oftentimes
nice.
it'll pop right out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But again, according to your chef's rules, you may or may not need to dig into that. So I find it's easy. Well, why crack the tail? I can just take my finger and the whole tail
push it
comes
through.
right out. You don't have to deal with trying to break the tail for any reason, in my mind. But some people have certain ways of doing it. So here's your tail. There's one more step here. So there's this. I don't know what it's called. Does it have a name?
I would call it track. I mean, it's basically the poop. It's the poop track.
So this thin.
So
piece,
they call it like a sandy track that you're trying to get out. Yeah, that is just kind of.
that comes off. But if you can see in here, that all needs to come out too.
Yeah.
And if you go down to this little corner of the tail, there's a little nerve or membrane in there that also needs to come out. Right there. But what you can see is all of this.
Yep.
That's not good eating. So what we'll do oftentimes is we'll have just a little bit of water.
Yep. Help rinse it off.
Rinse it off a little. Yeah, all gone. And we'll keep this too. Is it the best eating part of the lobster? No, but
Chop it up in a
chop it
lobster
up
salad,
in
yeah.
in a lobster roll or something like that, for sure.
Awesome. Okay, next we're going to make baked stuffed lobster. You should all have a copy of the recipe. If not, get in touch with us. But we've meased out all of our ingredients for baked stuffed lobster. Measing is very, very important, so make sure that you get that done. So one of the first things in the instructions that we need to do is to split and clean our lobster. So do you want to demonstrate how to do that?
It would be my pleasure. Wave bye.
Bye.
So, for the baked stuffed lobster, we do have to kill the lobster before we stuff it and put it in the oven. I've done one here already. As you can see, his cavity's been opened up. Everything else is intact. I've gone down the tail just a little bit, but I haven't cut through the tail. As you can see on this side, the tail is still intact in the shell here. So what I'm going to do is match this guy to this guy. So here's my lobster. What I want to do is make sure the bands stay on, because especially an active lobster can get your hands with these claws. You can reach back and grab them. While it's not going to take a finger off or anything, it's definitely not very pleasant either. So what I'm going to do is right about here, right behind that first set of legs, I'm going to take my chef's knife, blade facing the head, and I'm going to push down all the way, and in a quick motion I'm going to come through the front, just like that. Okay, at this point he's dead, so I'm just going to take my knife and go maybe to the second swimmerette. Maybe. So here is the inside of your lobster, and as you can see, there's the tamale in there, which we'll talk about once we break down the lobster. But really important is there's this mouth. I'm not sure if that's the technical term, Chef Barron, or not, but it runs all the way down, and it's this really sort of plasticky in texture kind of thing that you really don't want in there, especially if people are going in for the tamale. So you just kind of pull that out with your hand. I did go a little too far on this guy. I cut through his back, but honestly that won't matter once it's all said and done, because there's no meat in here to cook. So what you're cooking as far as the lobster goes is this portion, the claw, the knuckle, and the tail, and then the tamale. So the stuffing will go in the cavity, and I like to go just down the tail a little bit with the stuffing, which is why I cut into here. And then at this point you can remove the bands.
Now I still see his swimmers moving and stuff like that. What does that mean?
That's just nerves. I think
So it's not alive. Definitely not alive.
It was dead the second I put my knife through the front of him. But all animals kind of have that electricity that's still in their body even after they've perished. So you can see the difference. I did go through this guy a little too much. My first one was a little bit better. I guess I was a little eager.
Yeah, well, they're soft shells too, so you do
Right.
have to, be careful with them too. Okay, so we're gonna start our stuffing by sauteing up our onions, shallots, and garlic in some butter. Lots and lots of butter. It'll be delicious in our stuffing. So you're gonna take about 3 to 5 minutes of cooking these. You wanna make sure they're softened and don't have too much color on them. You don't want that caramelization taste with our stuffing, and we want to be cautious because this stuffing is also going to be put into our lobsters and then baked again. So we don't want any burnt parts, okay? So we've already sauteed these up for 3 to 5 minutes. Next thing I'm going to add is my dry sherry. You can use cream sherry if you want, but I actually prefer dry sherry with my lobster. So I'm going to go ahead and add that, okay? I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. I had it on about a medium. I'm going to turn it up to a medium high and just reduce that sherry in half. Okay, next, now that our sherry has been reduced to half, I'm going to go ahead and add in my scallops. Now these are a little bit bigger scallops, so I just cut those up just to kind of have it easier to taste in our lobster. So I'm going to let that cook for about 3 minutes. Okay, next we're going to cook our shrimp. So these shrimps we actually halved up. They're quite big, so we have these ones up. Same thing like the scallops, just make them for better eating. And you can see my scallops are already starting to cook. They're not translucent anymore, getting kind of white. And the same thing's going to happen with our raw shrimp. They will be pink. If you have cooked shrimp at home, that could work. Just add them when you add the crab meat, but we want to cook them right now. So same thing, we're going to let this cook for about 3 minutes.
Right, guys, and if you were to cut all this up into little pieces, you would lose it all in the stuffing. You never know. You wouldn't be able to tell a shrimp from a scallop from a piece of crab. So it's nice to have these big chunks.
Now that our seafood is all pretty much cooked, we're going to go ahead and put it into a small hotel pan here, or if you have a bowl or something like that. And we're going to actually cool this down for about 30 minutes.
Why do we need to cool it down before we make the stuffing?
Well, if we were prepping this for a restaurant, we don't want to have hot stuffing. That would really kind of keep the heat, and we'd end up getting, definitely getting customers sick. It would kind of breed bacteria, it wouldn't cool off good. So if we cool this off first, and then we kind of make the stuffing, that will kind of help to make sure that it is a cold product when we have it in refrigeration. And then later on for service. Okay.
All right, guys, so we're gonna go ahead and stuff these lobsters now. I have already put one skewer through one of these guys. What this does is, oftentimes with proteins during the cooking process, they'll like to curl on you. You'll see that with duck breast. You'll see that with some fish that have the skin on. So what the skewer is doing is it's just gonna keep the tail straight so that it doesn't do this while it cooks. So we're just gonna go right down the middle. Please do remember to pull the skewer out before you serve. And then we're gonna go pretty heavy because while it cooks, the stuffing will sort of settle in there. So what I'm gonna do, put a little in the tail, just like I had said earlier. Just like that. And then I think we can maybe put a little shrimp on the top there. So when he comes out, people can see that. And then we'll do the same to the other side. Another thing to keep in mind while you're cooking these, or while you're getting them ready to cook, is you really kind of want them to keep their shape, because whatever kind of position that they're in when you cook them, they're going to stay like that. So what I'm going to do, just kind of make them look a little bit more like a lobster. That way when you slide them onto a plate, which is typically how you would serve these, you'd slide them right onto a plate. You know, they have that kind of lobster shape to them. And we'll find another shrimp. At the top there. And then you can drizzle a little butter on here if you like. But at this point, they're pretty much ready for the oven.
Okay, while our baked lobsters are
Do it. Yes, take two.
okay.
I'm putting that in there.
Take two. Okay. While our baked stuffed lobsters are in the oven, we're going to go ahead and break down our steamed lobsters that we've cooled in our ice bath. As you can see, it's quite watery now. But let's just talk about our setup really quick before we start breaking these down. Now, Chef, I noticed that you had this set up when we were breaking down the baked lobsters. Why is this cutting board in the pan like this?
It's to keep the juices from, be it the water or the liquids coming out of the lobsters, to not drip down over the side of the table, onto my shoes, onto anything I might be storing underneath on one of the shelves. So it keeps everything kind of contained right in my...
Makes for an easy cleanup too.
Sure does. You just pick it up and walk over to dish.
If you don't have a pan like this at home, if you're doing this at home, just have a bunch of towels ready, because it does get quite messy, especially if your ice bath is kind of like really gone to water now. So it's just good to be kind of like cautious of that. The other thing we have here is a bowl that is in some ice, so that way when we pick the lobster meat, it can go right in here. That way we keep everything at a safe temperature.
So one thing you do want to keep in mind too, when you're picking the lobsters, is oftentimes this will be ready to eat food. So if you're not serving yourself, if this is in a restaurant setting, you want to wear gloves, because it might be going into a lobster roll. It's not going to see heat again. It may be going into a pasta dish where it is, but I would use it, consider it ready to eat food at this point.
Okay, so let's get some gloves on and break these down.
All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm just drizzling a little bit of butter on top. I had mentioned that when I was doing it. What that does is it kind of will add a little bit of binding to it, but it also adds this nice kind of brown texture you guys will see when it comes out of the oven. I like to do that with any kind of stuffed anything. You could do a crab stuffed haddock, and I would always kind of drizzle some kind of fat on top.
Okay, so our baked stuffed lobsters are done out of the oven, slightly cooled, so we can go ahead and put them on the plate. So first thing, we want to remove that metal skewer. That's not going to taste very good. Just be careful, because it is really fragile now that the shells aren't cooked.
And also, if you're doing this right out of the oven, that's going to be screaming hot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so place them on the plates.
Sometimes you might want to do this with a spatula. I think these guys are going to hold together just fine.
Yep.
Which they did. This is the broken one, so he might fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, really try to support that body. That's where all this stuff is. Here we go. Nice. Get rid of that pan. Also, I melted some butter. Butter makes everything better, especially with lobster. This butter has not been clarified. There are some places, Chef and I were just talking about, that we worked in that do clarify butter. So it all depends on where you work, but we both kind of like that fat content that's in the butter. Make sure you use salted butter. Unsalted butter melted like this is just not going to taste the same. So try to use your salted butter. Lastly, you can kind of add just a little bit more color to your dish by adding a few parsley sprigs to your baked stuffed lobster. Yeah, put that right in there. So I like to do that. Okay, and then some parsley sprigs. Just keep it all together. I kind of like to stuff it underneath here and there, type of thing. It's not to be really eaten. It's just more of a kind of a color garnish. Give it some brightness. And then, of course, a couple of lemon wedges here.
I think you guys will find once you get out of the business, if you don't serve seafood with lemon, especially in Maine, people are going to ask for it.
Yeah. And this fun trick too. I don't know if it'll work on this plate, but we'll see. open up its claw, put a little lemon wedge on it. Let's see what it is here. So that's our big stuffed lobster. Okay, one thing we want to talk about before we end this is shellfish allergies. So lobsters are part of the shellfish allergy. There are actually some people that are allergic to just fish. Some people are allergic to shellfish. You got to make sure that you know your customer's specification. What are some helpful hints as far as handling lobsters in a restaurant?
Gloves. Remember, shellfish is one of those big 8 allergies, along with dairy and wheat and some of the other ones that you guys learned about in Serve Safe. So your customer should be telling you if they have a shellfish allergy, and if you get that in a kitchen, you make sure that you sanitize everything before and after. You're using new equipment. You're keeping it far away from any of the other food, especially the food that's going to the same table as the person with that allergy.
Yeah, and in some restaurants, they're actually color-coded. So kind of like nut allergies too, shellfish is the same thing. They might have specific cutting boards, utensils that you have to use when dealing with shellfish allergies, because it is one of the more severe allergies. Someone can actually really, really get sick from it. So just make sure that you are handling lobster safely.
Yes.
Well, thank you for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We definitely miss our classes a lot, but this was kind of fun. Let us know what video we should do next, to be honest.
Yeah.
Want to do another video?
I do, I think.
Okay.
Unless you guys hate it.
Yeah.
And
Bye, guys.
wait,
Oh.
I wanted to say something. Seniors. Seniors. No, I just wanted to give my seniors a shout out. I had a great 2 years with you guys. I don't know if we're going to see each other as a group again, which is really unfortunate. But I'm thinking about all you guys, and my seniors in particular. Reach out. We need to get some things back to you, chef codes, your binders, stuff like that. So look for the worksheet too. There's homework attached to this. I don't know if you have homework.
No, I'm not going to.
I do.
I just want them to make lobster, make it delicious.
Okay. All right. So now you can do your
Now I
outro.
go, bye.
Yeah, bye. Bye.
Bye.